This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, profitability of the pork industry. Can they stand the prosperity? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast this weekend. Mr. Pearson is not at the desk, but he'll be checking in momentarily from the World Pork Expo. We know that weather is on the minds of so many of you. Greg Solier will be along in just a few minutes to take a look at that crucial weather forecast for the growing season days ahead. There's so much hanging in the balance right now, to be sure. They had pretty good weather for World Pork Expo this week. It was warm, as it can be many years, at the state capital, Des Moines, Iowa. But they were back there after a hiatus brought on, of course, by the pandemic. And they were talking a lot about the profitability of the industry, the fact that those hog prices are so strong right now. Mike got some input on that, and he shares the insight with us in this visit.
Well, Max, here at the World Pork Expo in 2021, a lot of producers are using this time to sort of decompress and figure out the past 18 months. They have been on a roller coaster ride of prices and profit margins, and we wanted to get to the bottom of it. So we checked in with our good friend Dave Bauer from Cargill Provimi about just what this roller coaster has looked like when we dig into the numbers.
Well, I don't know if you've ever been on the Raging Bull roller coaster, but that's probably what it's been for a lot of people with the ups and downs of the market. One week we're looking at a situation, and a couple weeks later, then it's an entirely different situation. So there's been a lot of uncertainty with a strong undertone as we've come into this year for strong markets. And obviously right now I hear people talking from many different trading segments that would say the hog market right now is one of the strongest markets they've seen.
It is, and just looking at the past 6 months, 7 months of hog market moves, Dave, what have you seen when you look at the numbers?
Well, the transition is that we've gone from negative margins in fourth quarter to now we're looking at $75, $80 per head margins based on the CME index as a revenue over the next 30 to 60 days.
Dave, put that into perspective, $75, $80 per head. How often does that happen in the hog industry?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been watching it for a long time, and I've not seen that kind of a move when we've seen $50 to $55 rallies, and whether it be the cash trends or the futures trends, the negotiated markets, which are a true test of how much the packer is looking for hogs, and he goes into that negotiated market. That market's up 125% from the first of the year. So we're 55 to 75% higher in the futures and the cash market cutout and the CME index, but 125% in that negotiated market.
As you look out ahead, Dave, and I know you spend a lot of time working on producers to help their profitability forecasting, talk us through what you're seeing, because we're also seeing a rally in the grains. We're seeing a rally in input costs. I mean, producers are going to feel a squeeze eventually, right?
Well, absolutely. And if you think back about it, when we were negative margins, we were at $3 to $4 corn. Now all of a sudden, today I show a 12-month average of $5.99, so $6 corn, but our profitability is an average $25 to $30 per month for the next 12 months. Now that's kind of weighted to the front end with a $75, $80 profitability for the next 30 to 60 days as the market is today. And then you get out into fourth quarter, into Q1, Q2 2022, and you're looking at $15 to $20 per head profits today.
How are producers taking advantage of these profitability margins? Because we've also seen some folks have some health challenges this past year in North America. PRRS was a bad issue, so there's some uncertainty from a production standpoint. How are guys managing this profitability?
Yeah, and that's been one of the big key factors of drivers behind today's market, and the strength we've seen in this market is we've known that from Thanksgiving to Christmas we had some pretty tough health challenges, and so those are playing out in market animals from now for another month or a month and a half. So our numbers and support to this market is going to be pretty good for the next 3 to 5 weeks. But then as you start getting out forward, and we go from an August to an October contract, and we start to see things fall off. So your question about what they're doing, working with their risk management teams to make sure that there is no rock unturned and to keep that pencil sharp. Manage your margin. Don't be so focused on the market. Manage your margin. It's a lot less stomach acid when you do it that way.
Just to put some of these numbers in perspective, Dave mentioned that $75 to $80 per head profitability are profit levels not seen in some people's lifetimes, Max. So this is a very big opportunity for domestic hog producers, but as Dave mentioned, there's always concerns looking down the pipeline into the future.
Oh yes, we're going to talk about the markets this weekend on This Week in Agribusiness. Brian Splitt joins us from agmarket.net. You having a good summer, Brian?
Having a good summer, enjoying it so far, Max. Thank you.
I guess it's premature to ask about summer, but we've been in summer weather for days, and we have to talk about weather. I want to do that momentarily. But this week, USDA, with its supply-demand report, did no damage, it appeared, to the corn rally.
No, the USDA reduced the ending stocks of old crop corn. Half of the adjustment came from added corn for ethanol. The other half came from export, so 75 million bushels each, totaling 150 million bushels. And that reduction then came directly off of the new crop balance sheet. So things did tighten up further, which just puts that much more pressure on the weather market that we're experiencing currently.
Exports, you mentioned that. Export sales this past week, were they very impressive?
Well, we're at a pace right now where we still believe that the USDA is potentially still underestimating the exports. Some of the data that we get from ADM suggests that the USDA might have been 200 million bushels too light on exports. They adjusted at 75. So I think that we still could potentially see another 100 million bushels, but we'll have to see kind of how the export pace continues as we get through the rest of the marketing year. If prices continue to go higher, then we may not see that extra export demand come to fruition in the balance sheet. So I think the USDA is going to kind of take it as it comes over the next few months. And remember, we did have a large flurry of export purchases by the Chinese after the May WASDE report. So I think the USDA had to make an adjustment based on that.
You mentioned the Chinese. Let's talk about them here. You know, what's your feeling about their continued buying, the possibility they'll continue to buy here? Are they going to maybe put things on hold and wait to see what this crop looks like? They're very shrewd buyers, as you know. Sometimes they'll buy, cancel, wait in the bushes, wait for the market to fall back, and then come back in to buy at lower prices.
Our opinion is that if the Chinese do cancel, it'll be more of a political issue. We really don't believe that they want to cancel any of these purchases, so it might be more for show. Right now, the Chinese have stated that one of their goals is to really rein in inflation domestically. Part of that is going to be by cracking down on speculators, but you can only crack down so much on internal speculators in China infecting the market. What really is going to impact their domestic inflation is by having enough product in country to control prices. And so we still feel that that's the main goal of the Chinese, is to get enough product in country and to build the reserves to levels where we don't have $11 corn on the Dalian exchange anymore. We think that the Chinese need to get enough product in country to get prices back to where they were over the last several years, closer to $6 to $6.50.
Domestically, as far as corn usage is concerned, looking at that grind for ethanol, that continues to climb, does it not? Back up to the level, well, the highest level, I guess, since prior to the pandemic now.
It is, and we continue to see the outside markets help that. Crude oil is back above $70 a barrel. And one of the things that we're seeing, interestingly, on some of these production is that we're not seeing the wells and rigs getting put back into production. A lot of the profits that are being made at higher priced crude oil is driving the investors that want to see some money returned on their investment. So we're seeing that rather than the money being put back into bringing rigs back up. So the rig count is not going up as quickly as you might think it would with $70 crude oil. And the charts are looking pretty positive right now. We've taken out some long-term downtrends on crude oil. The products look very supportive. And if we continue to see that, we're going to continue to see that really help the ethanol sector.
We want to come back and visit with you a little bit more. We have some other questions looking ahead toward more USDA figures before this month is out. Stay with us, Brian. Brian Split from agmarket.net. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by the Soybean Checkoff. Tips, videos, how-tos, and more. If it has to do with ag tech, you'll find it in the Tech Tool Shed, your unbiased one-stop resource. Brian Split is joining us this weekend from agmarket.net. And I want to look ahead a little bit. As of this weekend, we're 2.5 weeks away from June 30th. That's looming large on the horizon out there for more guidance from the USDA. It could be a very important report day. Could bring some volatility, couldn't it?
It will. The anticipation of that report will bring volatility. The previous 2 quarterly stock reports, we've seen limit up moves. And my concern is that between now and that report, we feel very strongly producers need to do what they can to quantify their farm income. There's 2 major risks to the market right now. We know that weather's one of them. We know that when we're in a weather market, the forecast can flip at any time. We were thinking back to 2016, and we had closed on the high on a Friday, and then we had opened up that Sunday night. Coming out of the weekend, the forecast flipped, and that was the top of the market. The other concern is going to be the USDA, and as we get to the end of the month, that report is going to look at planted acres. There's some private estimates out there that corn acres could be as high as close to 97 million. We're not in that camp at agmarket.net, but we have to be aware of the potential. We won't put that past the USDA to throw a number out there like that. And if we do have a number on corn acres that high, that's going to add nearly 1 billion bushels onto the balance sheet just like that. So that would be a limit down type of a number to finish the quarter. And unless we're already in a raging weather market with drought, that's the type of report that would top the market. So we think it's very important to at least try to get some kind of downside coverage, quantify your risk, maybe have puts at some major chart levels just to make sure that the USDA does not throw a wet blanket on this market at that point.
I heard a number of anecdotal reports visiting with growers that they didn't change their mix much in terms of planting this spring. Those 50-50 guys over the heart of the Corn Belt sort of stayed there, many of them. Is that the kind of thing that tempers a little bit the Informa estimate of close to 97 million acres of corn?
I think you're right, Max, and that's kind of where we are. We felt that the majority of the principal acres were accounted for, and if there was a shift, it's got to come from another product. So if the corn acres are going to go up substantially, it has to come from another product that's going to be losing acres. But I know to their thought process, they were looking at a survey they did. They also said, hey, part of this is economics, and we can't deny that the price of both corn and soybeans did climb tremendously since we had the spring crop insurance averages made in February. And then we also have the idea that input costs went up quite a bit. So was it actually very viable to get fertilizer if you hadn't planned on putting corn on that ground? So these are all the things that really make us question if we can get the corn acres up to those levels. But again, the USDA in March of 2020 had a 97 million acre number for corn, and you just don't know what kind of number they're going to throw out. So that acreage number with all the prevent plant and everything was really was an argument of debate for quite a while. And 2019 is another example of that with the flooding that we had. So acreage is going to be an issue here. But if the USDA says it, the market's going to trade it.
We have about a half minute left here. Looming on the horizon, the Fed Open Market Committee meets this week with 5% inflation in the nation. Is there anything that holds risk there for the grain market?
Well, right now, the Fed, will they start to raise interest rates? It feels like they're really backed into a corner. The dollar has been static around 90, and we're kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop. I think if the dollar starts making new lows for the year, that's going to really signal to the investors that we are likely to see this major inflationary push through the end of the year, at least through the rest of the third quarter here as we get into the beginning of the third quarter, starting in July. So the Fed meeting, if we can see the dollar make some new lows, I think that brings some value into all commodities, and we'll see them make new highs regardless of the weather potential for the corn and soybean markets.
Brian, thank you. We appreciate the visit. Brian Split, agmarket.net. Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. In the farmer's workplace, whether it's in the office or it's in the cab, the combine cab, tractor cab, pickup truck cab, you'll often see a tablet. Sometimes you'll see more than one. Colby homes in on the tablet this weekend. He's always looking for the new stuff.
Do you use an iPad on your farm or ranch or in your business? Hi everyone, I'm Chad Colby. You tuned in to a great tech segment if you do, because this week I'm going to give you that first look and review of the new iPad. Now, the two models of iPad Pros, they don't look a lot different. As you can see right here, it's got that unique styling where the camera location is, kind of like our iPhones have done. But as far as the physical shape, it's the same, which is great because it allows users like myself to ensure it'll fit back in all the mounts I have, like this Ram mount here in my pickup truck. So if you've got an 11-inch Pro that you use in your tractor or combine, it's going to fit right in those mounts, which is really handy. But inside the device, honestly, that's where the rules just don't apply anymore. This has the new M1 processor in it. That's the same one that was launched in the 13-inch MacBooks. And these are a powerhouse. And when you get to the 1 terabyte of storage and beyond, you get 16 mega RAM, which allows that fancy new camera to do all kinds of amazing things. Now here over the next 6-8 months, when iOS 15 rolls out, the new one, you're going to see a lot of enhancements with that camera system. And to do that, they needed a lot of power. But when you pair this tablet up with some of the accessories that are already out there, it works great. My smart keypad that I used on my previous one worked. The pencil worked, as you can see here. But check this out. I can have an external monitor plugged into that USB, and it works great. And here on This Week in Agribusiness this week, Max, look at this. I've got a professional-grade microphone plugged into my tablet. I love it. Way to go, Apple. Some great new technology. If you're in the market for a new tablet, now's the time. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
We appreciate Chad's report. I think I have a new nickname for him. I think in the future we may refer to Chad as Mr. Microphone. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Well, the folks in the swine industry have known for a long time how important biosecurity is. Herd health is crucial. And Mike at the World Pork Expo this week visited with a man who knows that subject very well.
Max, you know what they say. Necessity is the mother of invention. And after the PED outbreak in 2014 in America, the hog industry recognized they needed to have a way to keep track of all the health risks that exist both domestically and globally. To that end, Dr. Paul Sundberg set up the Swine Health Information Center. We had a chance to talk with him at the World Pork Expo this year, and he filled us in on what SHIC does and what he's watching for as 2021 continues.
SHIC was formed in 2015 by a one-time grant of the National Pork Board to monitor for diseases, both domestically and around the world. We don't want to be surprised anymore about what we're at risk of, to be prepared, prevent, prepare, and respond to those, as well as take a look at the different databases that the industry puts together and try to analyze them with the specific objective of uncovering emerging diseases so we find it fast, we can respond to it quickly, and we can recover quickly.
You know, if I think about the 5 years or 6 years now that SHIC has been in existence, we've had African swine fever outbreak, we had the tail end of the PEDV outbreak, and we've got ongoing experiences with PRRS. Dr. Sundberg, you guys have probably been quite busy over the past 5 years. What's the future look like?
Yeah, so nobody knew about China getting ASF in 2018 when we were formed. So the issue is, what do we have to know about that we don't know about? And one of the things that we've done in that effort of showing value is a return on investment report. We've done an analysis of all of the things that we've worked on during the last 5 years. The issue is we were funded for a certain period of time by the National Pork Board, and the idea was this is a shot. We took a shot at something new, something different. If you can monitor, can prevent, prepare, and analyze it's a return on investment, and we'll look at extending it. So we've prepared that report, and hopefully the producers will see a value in what we've been doing the last 5 years.
Well, let's talk about what you've been doing. Let's start with African swine fever. Continues to be a concern in both Eastern Europe and in Asia. Dr. Sundberg, what have been some of the developments recently with ASF? What's your outlook on that virus?
Well, we are under what I term epidemiological pressure from ASF like no other virus in the world. There is so much ASF around the world that there's so much virus, and North America is still negative. And so there's a lot of pressure on getting that into the country. It's still circulating in Eastern Europe, wild boar primarily in Eastern Europe, but Romania, Russia, Poland have active infections. Of course, you got the largest pig herd in the world in China, and it's still active there, all of Southeast Asia. So we've worked really closely with USDA and the state animal health officials, Customs and Border Protection, and the other industry associations to do everything we can do to close windows to keep it from getting here, as well as making sure that if it gets here, we're prepared to respond just as quickly as we can with the objective of containing it.
And we've got containment, and of course there's always that hope of vaccination. What is your outlook here on the vaccine possibility for ASF?
Yeah, you know, if you would ask me back in 2018 when China got ASF, what about vaccine? My answer probably would have been we're looking at least 10 years out. But there's been a lot of progress, and there's a lot of incentive to make that progress with that virus moving all around the world. So there's been a lot of progress. USDA's done a really nice job of the research necessary to be able to grow the virus in culture now, instead of having to do it in white blood cells of pigs. So that's at a quantity that you can make a virus. Vietnam is testing USDA prototype vaccines on the outbreak farms in Vietnam to see how they work and how they respond. There's a lot of other world research that's going on in England and in China and elsewhere. It's all with the objective of a safe and effective ASF vaccine. I can't predict how close it is, but it's much closer than what it looked like back in 2018.
Well, that's good news, Dr. Sundberg, because we continue to find new health threats in this industry. One of them is not a new one necessarily, but it's PRRS. This past year, 2020, 2021, that's been in the headlines. It certainly caused a lack of sleep for some producers. What happened with PRRS to make it become so resurgent?
PRRS is a virus, and it's a virus that's very good at adapting and changing in order to keep making infections. And what happened in the latter part of 2020 was a new line of an old strain of PRRS developed that ability to change and develop that ability to infect pigs at a very high level, very bad level from all different stages of production, primarily in the upper Midwest. So we went through an outbreak in late 2020, and then it was a relatively quiet period in February. We're at the peak of another outbreak now. The same thing, just moving again through the herds.
Max, another comment that Dr. Sundberg made was that biosecurity is perhaps the most efficient way we have of maintaining herd health. So it's not enough to just write down biosecurity protocols. It's vital that they're practiced by everyone on the hog producers team.
Thank you, Mike. We'll check back in a little bit later. We hear that ground pork was in focus at Pork Expo this week. We'll share that coming up. Stay with us. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. Welcome back to this weekend's This Week in Agribusiness. We'll have Mr. Pearson back in a few minutes, reporting in from World Pork Expo, and Greg Solier looks at those critical weather maps. But this weekend, we wanted to check in out in the field with our old friend, Mr. Colby. You saw him showing off some new technology earlier in the broadcast. You're never far from that stuff, are you, pal?
You know, it was a big week for me, Max. When Apple has their developer conference, I kind of geek out for a few days, so I apologize for that.
Much of that technology, of course, is showing up on our farms. There's a lot of it in the cab, and it's all around the growers to help them do an even better job of producing out there. What are you hearing from the growers at this stage of the growing season as you stay in contact with so many of them out there?
You know, I think the challenge the last couple weeks, once we got a little warmer temperatures, is the lack of moisture in a lot of places and a lack of widespread moisture. That's been the concern. I talked to several producers this week, and wow, you hear horror stories of, hey, no rain, super dry conditions, to we didn't need 3.5 inches. That did more harm than good. So I think weather is certainly got everybody's attentions. The market's reacting toward it. And there's been some challenges, Max. A lot of guys had replant that they finished up here in the last couple weeks. And with those cold temperatures, there were some sulfur problems that showed up in some fields. So, you know, this year's far from over. And even though we've got kind of that positive trend in the markets, this crop's got a long ways to go. And in certain places, and a lot of our viewers, man, they're praying for some real moisture, not just a couple tenths, Max.
We still have busy field operations going on, of course, with side dressing in some instances, spraying applications in others. It is still a very busy time along the roadways in rural areas. We need to remind folks of that once more, don't we? We see images every now and then of collisions, and they're shocking.
Yeah, you mentioned it. There's been a couple here on social media the last couple weeks that make your heart just sink, Max, because you think, oh my gosh, I hope that guy made it. And luckily they did in a lot of those cases. So you're 100% right. It just seems like every year we forget about farm equipment on our rural roads. But you're right. A lot of guys are getting their spraying done. They're getting their side dress done, kind of taking a step back and start to evaluate what this crop even looks like. And one of them this morning said, I'm hoping I'll get my stuff wrapped up so this coming weekend when your show's on, I get to watch it because I got all my work done finally. It's my first weekend off this spring. So a lot of guys are getting caught up.
We'll catch up with you another day. Thank you for joining us this weekend, Chad. We appreciate it. Have fun with your new whatever it is I've got to buy next now.
New technology, Max.
I swim through the bubble wrap in the garage thanks to you. Take care of yourself.
Thanks.
Now, agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier brings us his farm weather forecast for the nation for the week ahead. It's presented by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, whether or not. Many of us can remember previous heat waves. They tend to stay in our mind, all right? I remember being in eastern Washington one summer. Every town you'd come into, places like Pasco, triple digits on the bank sign.
Yep, and perhaps close to that here for this week. I think the epicenter of this heat wave, recall last week up through the Canadian Prairie, the Dakotas, anywhere between about 98 and 106 degree record high temperatures at Bismarck. Well, we're going to do the old retrogression back to the west and drop it down to the south, and this is the eastern flank of some of that heat, and may as well trigger maybe a couple of showers and thunderstorms. Got some localized drought relief last week across parts of the Dakotas. This trough, though, probably more typical of dry base thunderstorm activity. The fires are already underway in the southwest. It could be a pretty busy active fire season across much of the west, including the Pacific Northwest. We do get somewhat cooler, drier air on its move across the Washington State area into Big Sky country. Maybe a stray shower thunderstorm into the northern plains, so temperatures come down the end portion of the week. Note, no organized rainfall, no substantial drought improvement in that part of the country. Here is the eastern flank of the heat up across areas of Nebraska, Kansas, triple digit in this corridor, a benign weather system offshore of California. And here comes the surge of heat back into the valleys of the air. There's really no, by the way, leftover snow pack and runoff. We're done with that already. So irrigation demands, boy, big time, with readings heading towards 120 degrees over parts of the southwestern U.S., triple digit into the central and southern high plains as well.
Looking over the livestock market listing there, the website for the Rugby livestock market in Rugby, North Dakota, they had drought resources listed there along with all the cow and calf pairs coming to market on Monday. It's really a pressured area.
Exactly, and at least temperatures will kind of moderate some as the week wears on. Organized rainfall, we've seen it already. Best of it last week was up across the Canadian Prairie. A weak cool front on the move, and it may generate a stray shower thunderstorm, but behind it, back into heat here for this part of the country. Seasonal warmth across much of the Corn Belt, and so the dryness, the drought issues continue on, where we've had recharge over the southern Corn Belt. Already reports of some knee-high corn into parts of downstate Illinois. Here is the heat through West Texas, building northward for now. The warmth across the lower Mississippi Valley Delta region to be nice to get some dry time in this waterlogged area of the country. Maybe a stray shower thunderstorm as the monsoon season tries to get going into West Texas. Cotton 105 to 115 plus in this part of the country, and points on westward. Hot, dry north and northwesterly wind flow. We need that into the Delta region and lower Mississippi Valley.
Some places in the east are dry too.
That's right, the Northeast, New England, and we'll get this frontal boundary and perhaps a couple of showers and thunderstorms. A drought monitor worsening here across the Great Lakes region with cooler air across the Great Lakes region. Here's seasonal warmth, a couple of thunderstorm clusters over the western Corn Belt mid to late portions of the week. It's an active weather pattern over the southeastern part of the country as the heat builds from about the Mississippi River on westward late in the week.
Now Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country. Presented by Pivot Bio Proven. Visit pivotbio.com to find a representative near you. Well, who gets the rain of the week ahead? We find out right now who the haves and have-nots will be. Greg Solier, what do you see?
Well, last week it was parts of the southern Corn Belt. Last week as well up across the Dakotas, southern Canadian Prairie. And that is it for any organized moisture, quarter to half in scattered. That's about 30, maybe 50% coverage the way we see it for parts of the Corn Belt, including some of the drier areas. So really ongoing dryness and drought. The story from the Dakotas westward, southwestern part of the country, upper Midwest, Great Lakes region. It will be this corridor where we do have some drier pockets showing up with some good coverage, half to one, maybe some local 1 to 3 inch downpours as the week goes on. Maybe a stray thunderstorm in the southwest. Otherwise, high and dry there too.
You know, looking at your maps a little bit earlier, I was thinking this is June.
Yes.
The map has the feel of July.
Exactly, and it will continue on into July and August. In this particular look and fashion, still 115-degree heat, parts of the southwestern part of the country. Wet grounds, cloud cover, moisture probably here, above average warmth across much of the northern and central Corn Belt locales, and an eastward expansion of this certainly below average precip setup over much of the country. Wet weather and the tropics. This may be a year where the systems come up in this part of the country and make their way. We anticipate a wet weather pattern, and that could be a benefit for the Northeast and New England and Mid-Atlantic region.
I don't hear you talking about many severe weather outbreaks in the southeast there.
That's right. It's been very quiet after an early start back during the late winter, early spring, and we had some severe weather, and that's trademark, that's paramount to this polar jet that rides up near the Canadian border. Had that last week with severe weather. Here's the heat. California, much of the plains, much of the Corn Belt into the eastern states, cloud cover keeping temperatures at bay. The wet weather comes into play. A nice monsoon set up here. Remember, that sparks lightning too on a northward movement of any of these thunderstorms. Look at the wide-ranging below average precip, including the drought areas of the northern plains, wet weather and busy tropics down through Florida and the southeastern part of the country.
Oh my. An already severe situation becomes even more so. We get past the 4th of July, still hot as a firecracker?
You betcha. Good way to call it here with temperatures a few degrees, maybe many degrees above average, kind of multi-areas of much above in a couple of spots. But anyway, warmth for California, Canadian border, much of the Corn Belt, a bit below average with high humidity though, cloud cover and moisture over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. Nice monsoon setup, hopefully some localized drought relief. Remember, it's all or nothing with these thunderstorms, lightning, or a flood and fires too in that part of the country. Busy tropics down through the Gulf Coast and through areas of the southeast. Normal precip for the northeast and New England. And again, watch the soil moisture levels. They'll be worsening on their way north to south across the Corn Belt and the Plain States too.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Who can blame someone for loving those 1950s era Olivers with that beautiful color combination, especially if there's one that Granddad had and one your great-grandfather had? Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. They are beautiful in appearance. They are solid in construction. Some of you will have a chance to see them out at the shows later this summer. Make room on your trailer. You might want to take one home. Check them out at storlock.com. Well, Derek Jacobs in Lincoln, Illinois, has two 1950 Oliver tractors. One of them belonged to his grandfather, and One belonged to his great-grandfather, and both tractors, yes, were made the same year. Let's take a look at them. Here's an Oliver 66. It had a loader on it many of those years with a trip bucket. It loaded a lot of manure in its life. Yeah, that Oliver 66 was bought new by Derek's great-grandfather, Frank Mox. And then there's the 77. It plowed, it planted. Yeah, they used it on a feed wagon, even had a mounted picker on it at one time. That Oliver 77, also made in 1950, was owned by Derek's grandfather, Dean Mox. A pair of Olivers made the same year, and the young man is very proud of them at Lincoln, Illinois.
Folks, another big sale on BigIron.com. June the 16th, 1,590 items from 182 sellers across 20 states are selling quality equipment. Mark Highby is retiring. He's from Revere, Minnesota. He's got a John Deere 9560 combine and a Case IH 7120 tractor. Berkemeyer & Sons Partnership out of Lake Village, Arkansas will be selling 2 John Deere 9760 STS four-wheel drive combines. Also, Mona and Michael Gordy, they're from Pampa, Texas. They've got their 09 Kenworth W900 semi-truck tractor with a winch, and they've got a 2011 John Deere 624K wheel loader. Eric German is from Hartshorn, Missouri. He's got a 2006 Gyro Track heavy-duty mulcher wood chipper. Also, John Thornquist is from North Henderson, Illinois. They've got a 2016 John Deere 6130M mechanical front tractor with a loader. They also have a Modern Flow 12-row self-propelled detasseler that will sell on June the 16th. Bruce Hansen from Webb, Iowa's got a John Deere 9760 combine, and Kimbrell Farms from Sunray, Texas will sell a John Deere 7460 cotton stripper and a bush hog cotton module builder. Go to BigIron.com, Max, for all of this equipment.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide, we stand for you. For our chapter tribute this weekend, Georgia is our destination. Chelly Trail is our guest here, who is a student at the Abraham Baldwin College in that state that has a great reputation. Chelly, it's great to visit with you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are a sophomore this fall, I understand.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about your experience as an officer. You just recently retired as a state officer, and it was a little bit different because it was a time of pandemic, of course.
Yeah, totally. So serving as a state officer, it really pushes you to develop those potentials for premier leadership, personal growth, and career success that's mentioned in our motto. But as far as the state officer year, even though we were faced with the challenges of COVID, my team was pushed to persevere through that. And our state theme was actually Rise Above. And this was a reoccurring theme for our team and just constantly pushing us to know that we can rise above. And whether that was virtual chapter visits, meeting with industry leaders such as we're meeting now over Zoom, or just other typical ways that you have to think outside of the box in order to push and still serve the students across our state.
Perseverance is an important lesson to learn. You want to go into ag education, I understand.
Yes, sir, indeed.
You would like to teach someday? What has drawn you to that career?
What's drawn me to agriculture education was actually my 2 ag teachers that I had in high school. So I had no agricultural background or experience, or so I thought, until I entered the ag classroom. And it was through the FFA and the SAE, as well as the classroom itself, which are the 3-ring model of agricultural education, that allowed me to see that ag ed is something completely different compared to those classrooms such as English or math. Not downing on those classrooms, but it just really pushes a student to go outside of their comfort zone and develop and see who they truly are and how they can make an impact, not only in their career or work choice, but in the world as a whole, because the agriculture industry does that.
Great educators have a way of bringing out the best in students, to be sure, and I'm sure you will. Crawford County is where you are, right? In our few remaining seconds, tell us about it.
Crawford County is a very small town. We have a population of about 2,000 and we have 2 red lights. So everybody knows everybody, and the ag portion of Crawford County is very well known and very well supported. I love being from the small town that I am.
Don't we all, I think, who grew up in a small town appreciate those values so much. Chelly, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us this weekend.
Thanks for having me.
Chelly Trejo, a recently retired state officer in the Georgia FFA organization.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
When I was a grade school student in Wisconsin more years ago than I care to remember, I don't think the word technology was in any of my class books. But boy, has that changed. Technology in agriculture, in the economy, and in companies has taken over the work we do to provide all of us with a good living. Technology. But when we get something good, we get bad people who find ways to make it bad. And we've certainly seen that recently by hackers who have gotten into companies like the oil pipeline company on the East Coast, and recently JBS, the biggest meat packer processor in the world, and they've been able to hack their way into their books and their rules and literally take over the companies or the entities. And I don't see that we're getting anywhere near doing something about putting an end to this, about making it unprofitable for hackers to get into companies, hospitals, and other entities here in the United States or around the world. So let's get to work on that, so we get the bad guys before they take over companies that they shouldn't be involved in. Cyber hackers, another word I'd like to eliminate from our language. Be safe, be well, and my thoughts on Samuelson Says.
While at World Pork Expo in Des Moines this week, our Mike Pearson heard how Americans fell in love with ground pork in the months of the pandemic last year. He'll share that story coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. Many of us who ascribe to that glass half full philosophy have been looking for all of the silver linings of the pandemic. There actually have been some. One of those for the pork industry was the discovery of ground pork by many consumers. Mike shares that story from the World Pork Expo.
Well, Max, as you know, at the World Pork Expo, of course, half the focus is on the pig producer. The other half is on the pork consumer. And when we think about 2021, pork consumers' behaviors started to change.
Well, I don't know that it was surprising to those of us in the industry, but we really found out that consumers do love pork. So pork sales, along with all proteins, were very strong. But a really interesting surprise was ground pork. When consumers couldn't go to restaurants, their favorite Mexican restaurants or Italian restaurants or Chinese restaurants, they were craving those flavors, and what they found was they needed recipes that contained ground pork. So ground pork became a destination product in the grocery store. And when some consumers couldn't find it, they would actually go to other stores to find it. 50% of the consumers who bought ground pork in 2020 had never bought ground pork before. So we'd like to say that ground pork had a moment in 2020, and we're trying to go with that momentum and extend it.
So how do you do that? How do you keep consumers involved in something like ground pork when their favorite Chinese restaurant is reopening?
Yeah, well, we don't expect food service will go back up as quickly as it came down. So a lot of consumers have refound their joy in cooking, if you will, and they've found out it's a lot more economical than eating out many times a week. So we have that going for us. But also, we have to take a multifaceted approach. Ground pork, while it's very familiar to pork producers, to those of us who grew up in Iowa, a lot of consumers hadn't had it before, and there wasn't necessarily goals placed in the packers to produce ground pork. it was a byproduct essentially, or even in your local retail store where they cut meat. So we are working with packers to make sure there's adequate supply, make sure they're thinking about it differently. We're working with retailers. We reset a meat case at a local grocery store today, just right here in Des Moines. We took pictures of it. They're going to train 20 stores throughout their system to reset that case, and we're going to look at the lift in sales.
That's fantastic, Angie. There's a lot of excitement as the economy looks to reopen. We're talking about consumers. We're talking a lot about buying and cooking at home. But of course, restaurants are coming back online. That is a great source of demand for pork. Do you expect anything to change on the restaurant side of the ledger as things reopen and the world returns to normal?
We're really focused right now, frankly, on the pork tenderloin sandwich. You've heard about the chicken sandwich wars, right?
Yes.
So we feel like we should insert ourselves into that, and we're working on that.
Well, Max, I know I've been cooking with ground pork for years, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have as well. And it turns out, in 2021, the rest of America is paying attention.
One more example of the need to pivot as the pork industry did it so well in the year of the pandemic. Well, many producers realize the importance of being flexible during these challenging times. And we'll be joined by some producers at the Farm Future Summit of the week ahead, Coralville, Iowa. We look forward to the visit there as we'll get some insight indeed as to how farmers can move through some of these uncharted waters. We look forward to seeing you next weekend on This Week in Agribusiness. So long, everyone. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.